Today we have a request for pin money pickles. Pin money was a term given for a little bit of money a woman would make, or maybe a little money that her husband would give to her. I thought that was so cute. We should totally still call it that. Anyway, let's learn more on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. The story is about a lady named Ellen Tomkins. She was born in Virginia in 1852. She married a guy named John Kidd. They had 10 kids together, but 5 of those babies would die by the time they were 2. So let's get into the story. Here's a 1915 article in a magazine. Here's a picture of Miss Ellen. When Ellen was about 16, she noticed that when people came over, they really enjoyed her pickles, and she started selling pickles to her friends and church members for a little pin money. It was a recipe passed down from her grandma. It was not many years later that she entered them in a fair and she won a prize. At some point, her business started picking up more and more, so her husband decided to leave the insurance business and he was helping his wife run her business. They were making pickles out of her kitchen until she needed more space. The factory that she ended up moving into is 6 stories tall, directly on a railroad track, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. She went to Chicago in 1873, so she was 21 at the time. She was going to visit relatives or a friend, and she met 2 guys from the Pullman Company. She apparently tried to get them to try some of her samples of pickles, and they didn't really want one. She said she had never been on a Pullman car, and she would like to go on one. So they ended up going to their diner, where she tasted their pickles. And she said, "Now that I've tried yours, why don't you try mine?" So when she returned home, she had an $800 order for Pullman passenger railway dining cars, which broadened her reach throughout the country. She ended up reaching out to family to grow enough burr gherkins to meet her demand. One of her family members then organized 4 counties to plant acres of gherkins. When they were ready to harvest, there were strategic brining stations so that the pickles could start brining while they were on their way, making their way back to Ellen. She would make deals with hotels to serve her pickles at their restaurants, and she would have them mention her pickles by name on their menus. So here's an example of that. Her pickles were served even at the White House. So let's back up a little bit and fill in some gaps. So the first time I see an ad for her pickles in the paper is 1885, almost 20 years after she began. Here's an 1887 publication. It says, "Pin Money Pickles." Odd name for pickles, isn't it? It's been adopted by a lady in Richmond who puts them up in her home for the pin money that she makes by it. The bottle and label are not very striking, but the pickles have a home-like character. The pickles are sweet and may be found to be an agreeable diversion from the ordinary kinds. Here's 1888. A Greek fraternity banquet served some pin money pickles on their menu. Here's her and her husband in the directory, 619 6th Street. So let's go see if we can find that. Well, the numbers don't really go past 199 anymore, and Google brings me here. So we'll move on. 1893, still at the same location, this ad says that you could get pickles in a half pint, or quart. 60 cents for a quart. That seems kind of pricey for 1893. 1899, here's a little ad for her pickles saying her pickles are the very best money could buy. But here's where I got a little confused. Is she pickling other stuff? Peppers. Okay, pickled bell peppers, I can see that. Mixed what? Then there's mango. Then there's martinia, cucumber mango, melon mango. Are all those just flavors? No, I think she might be pickling them. I just looked up pickle martinia and I had no idea what that would be, and there is such a thing. Okay, so I just learned something new. Now I've got to think about pickled melon and mango. What kind of melon? Cantaloupe? Interesting. 1900 census. Ellen is now 44. Her 5 living children are in their teens and they're living at home. This column asks her how many children she's had and how many are living. To think she's lost so many babies and still carries on. 1905, an attorney writes, "In my innocence, I purchased a jar of your pin money pickles. It brought me great trouble, and one of three things must occur. 1, you must stop making them. 2, I must get them at a less expense. 3, I'm a ruined man." Since my first venture, I've had many jars. My family, neighbors, relatives visit me with expectations of your pickles. Your pickles are my nemesis. Please, madam, quote them by the keg and preserve me. 1907, there's another list of things that she's pickling. Oh, this one says mixed pickles. Oh, okay, that's what the mixed was. I'm so curious on how a pickled mango would taste. I found a book called The Story of Pin Money Pickles, published in 1909. 1909, there's a newspaper article with the request for the recipe. Apparently, she was asked for the recipe by wives written in weekly. This one is not the pin money recipe, but here's how this lady did it in 1909. Cucumbers, mangoes, etc. are packed in a crock in layers with a thick strata of salt between. Enough cold water is poured over the top until the top layer is covered. A weight is put on top, and then this is left to brine for 24 hours. Then you stir with your bare hands from the bottom. Do this every day for a fortnight. Now, how long's a fortnight? Well, I had to look it up. It's 2 weeks. Then you take them out, you soak them in fresh water. Then you layer vine leaves in a copper kettle. Then layer the pickles in with a little alum between each layer. Fill it with water. Then you simmer for 5 hours, never let it boil. Now dump them in ice water. Now you prepare the vinegar solution, which has sugar, whole peppers, cloves, allspice, mace, and celery seed. Heat the vinegar solution and pour over the drained pickles. 2 days later, you take the vinegar solution out, you heat it again, and you return it back to the crock. You do this 3 times. Now put a breathable cover on it and let it sit in the cellar. It will be ready to eat in 2 months. It would be better in 6 months, but the prime is to wait 1 full year. 1910 census. Here's the household. There are 3 boys. Alan, Leo, and Hugh are in their 20s, still single, and they're all working at the family business. Here they all are in the 1910 directory. Later this year, her husband died. Also, in 1910, she took out a half-page ad in the paper, which included a drawing of her house and the addition that they built in the back, where she had been manufacturing the pickles until just recently, when it says that she just recently built a larger plant on a West Marshall Street, which has 10 times the capacity that she's currently working in. Look at the size of that house, though. I'm assuming this picture we're looking at is the location that we just looked at, which is really sad. Here's the new factory in its heyday. 1910, there's another book written called Pin Money Pickles, this time written by Ellen herself. Soon after, with the help of her boys, she incorporated her company as Mrs. E.G. Kidd Incorporated. They also started advertising it internationally by about 1914, which drastically boosted their sales. This says literally all over the world, including Hong Kong and London. It says that her sons are her assistants, but it says the business she established, built up, and managed is still solely her own. Here's a 1915 ad in Good Housekeeping magazine. Nice picture of the bottle. Notice the name of the company now. For at least a few years now, Ellen has been involved in the women's suffrage movement. Here's a photo of a suffrage rally on the steps of the Virginia Capitol in 1915. Women got the right to vote in 1920. This 1916 article says that they're about to sell pin money vinegar and that they have 17 different kinds of pickles right now. This 1916 article in the Marine Corps Gazette during World War I mentions that she's been in business for 30 years now and that she's introduced the pickles to the Marine Corps. Here's another Good Housekeeping ad. Here's her son Alan's World War I registration card. He's now 37. He's got the address to the factory on here. He put 1600 West Marshall Street, Richmond. Now this one says that it's 1500, but either way, Google brings me here. The numbers don't go past 1418, which is this building on the left, and this is not a 6-story building, so it's not standing anymore. We may not even be at the right corner, but this is the rest of the street. This is what her factory looked like. I looked at a couple of the surrounding buildings and no, it's not standing anymore. I wish these photos had some surrounding buildings. In 1920 census, she's now 66. She's been pickling for 50 years now. 2 of her boys are still home. They're in their 30s and they still work in the business. 1920, Ellen was asked what contributed to her success. She said, "In the early years, I vaguely saw what might be accomplished and put all my energy and determination to that effort. Concentration on quality has played a part, as I manufacture nothing but pickles, but those pickles must be good, the best that I can make them. It means so much that I'm still trying to improve my pickles and always will while I'm in the business. The easiest way for a manufacturer to ruin his business is to become self-satisfied." In 1921, here's all the different things we're pickling now. Pears, melons, onions, walnuts, and still doing the mangoes. That chow chow, as I understood it from past videos, is a type of relish. It's a condiment. So I'm really intrigued on some of these. I would really love to try some of these. Would they all just taste like a pickle, just different textures? Here's some mustard pickles. So the pickles themselves had some different flavors. This is just so interesting to me. 1925, there's an article here that states that Ellen was a treasurer of the Richmond League of Women Voters, among other organizations. It says she was interviewed by Evening Press and was the most gracious and friendly and most agreeable woman to meet. She says she doesn't think she's done very much, not any more than any other woman could do. I saw a few slides ago that she lived in Shenandoah Apartments in Richmond, but this article says she owned the apartments. I couldn't find it by just Googling though. I wonder if that statue is still standing. I searched statues in Richmond, and I think this one's it. What do you think? After Googling it, I figured out who that statue is. It's Robert E. Lee's statue, and unfortunately I saw it got vandalized by BLM. That's pretty horrible. Besides the point. So I was able to run around on that street and I came across a building that looks like it could be it. And I zoomed in. Yeah, that's it. So it still stands and it looks great. 1925, all I wanted to point out on this one is that there's pickled cauliflower listed in addition to the other ones we already saw. Also in 1925, the directory shows that Ellen is president and treasurer, her son Hugh is vice president, Leo is secretary, and Walter is assistant secretary. Now I don't see Alan in there, and I don't remember seeing Walter before. Here's a nice ad in 1927. The bottle design doesn't seem to stray from the original design. 1930, Ellen is 80 now. She's been widowed for 20 years now. Only one of her sons, Hugh, is home with her. He's 42, still single. It says she's no longer working, and it lists him as a real estate agent. So this made me go, okay, let's find out when things changed. So I looked back 5 years ago to 1925. The Kidd family is still running things, but in 1926, Thomas B. Scott is president. In 1929, he's still there, but by 1930, Mrs. E.G. Kidd Incorporated is no longer listed, and Thomas B. Scott is not listed as president of any company. Well, Ellen Kidd dies in 1932. What I thought was interesting is her son Leo was the informant, and he didn't know when her birthday was. So they just estimated that she was about 80. That he never acknowledged her birthday in all of his years. Well, she said that she was 80 in the last census, which was 2 years earlier, but she was actually 79 when she died. Her obituary says that she was the great-granddaughter of Major Day, who served on General Washington's staff. I'm thinking they're talking about George Washington. She fought for women's rights and was in different women's clubs. So that makes things confusing whenever I see a 1932 ad. Is this just leftover inventory being sold off, or is someone else making her pin money pickles? This 1937 ad says, famous since 1868, and says pin money pickles are made just as they have been for 3 generations in the same unhurried manner. They say, although the recipe hasn't changed, the methods of cooking and packing have changed and made the pickles more savory, more delicious than before. So someone else is making them, but I have no idea what the company name is or if they're still making them in Richmond, Virginia. This one from 1941 is wrong in its information, saying that in the gay 90s, Miss Kidd originated her recipe, which is wrong, but I was tickled that it says that the 1890s were considered the gay 90s. 1944 directory, I could only find 2 of the 3 sons. I found out that Alan died in 1923 at age 39. That was 10 years before Ellen died, so that's her 6th child that she had to bury. Ish. 1947, they are still talking about these pickles. It says, 75 years ago, a Richmond girl entered her homemade pickles at a county fair and took home some prizes. It talks a little bit about how now the line of pickles has expanded, saying that the pickles only represent a portion of the Pin Money's products. Here we go. 1950, Pin Money Pickle Firm to leave the city. It says the company has purchased a building in Gloucester County and will move all its operations there in 60 to 90 days, announced Stuart C. Wilson, president of the firm. The new home of Pin Money Brands Incorporated was originally built as a skating rink. Oh, this is interesting. It says the Richmond building that is being abandoned was condemned about 2 years ago, making a move necessary. It mentions a good part of the shipments are now going to Europe. It says the recipe remains the original. This article just retells the story again, but talks a little bit about this new guy, Stuart Wilson. But what I wanted to talk about in this article is that the author of the article says, in a minute I'll be saying hush my mouth, but then I've just sampled some of the pickled watermelon cubes, and they're that good that it went to my head. So I'm sitting here thinking, what the heck does pickled watermelon taste like? This is so cool. In 1950, you can buy a gift box of pickles. And here's 1955. 1956, her Shenandoah apartments are being sold and remodeled. 1963, this says more recently that John E. Kane purchased Pin Money Foods Company, formerly of Richmond, Virginia. This guy has his own company, but he's recently started buying up some pickle companies. So Pin Money Pickles just got absorbed into that. The last ad that I find is much later than I was expecting, 1975. I do not see the actual dissolve date of the company though, but the company was in business from 1863 till about 1975. That's over 100 years of these unique pickles. That's pretty darn good. She should be proud of that. I don't see much deviation from the original bottle design throughout my research. There's cork tops and screw tops, and I saw that there were bigger jars, but the design didn't change throughout. And I really had a good time with this one. Thank you for the suggestion. And remember, you can request either in the comments or you can email me. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.